We're missing a few. Let's go back into Chrome and any questions on this so far? Cool. So again, this is another thing where like probably gonna make some sense while you're looking at it, and then when we go to implement it, like you'll have questions. Yeah. So don't fret if you're like that conceptually makes sense, and then when you go try it, like you're gonna run into syntax errors. You're gonna run into like things that don't seem to flow. The best thing is like let's just practice.
I got a quick question.
Yes.
Why are you using equals and greater to than just equals?
When I'm declaring the functions? Good question. So let's make a new function called test here. So this equal and greater than are actually not an equal and greater than. Those are the letters that they are. But in this case here, that is the part of the expression that tells JavaScript that this is a function. The function part is here. This is the function part. This is the keyword that says assign a variable. This is the variable name. This is the assignment operator, like let name equal to Gavin. These are the arguments. This is the arrow. So this style of function is called the arrow syntax because this is an arrow. This arrow says the thing on the left are the arguments, the thing on the right is the function itself. It's a very good question because it leads into the next thing we're going to talk about. And it's a little bit about, related to Toby, what you were saying before, is this idea of expressions. So we said before that we could have, right, my name and my favorite number. And then we could do math with them, we can add them, we can concatenate them. But we can also do logic on them, right? And logic is kind of the thing that ties together our data and our behavior, right? If all we could do is add things together and multiply them, our programs could not make any decisions about what to do, right? So far you've seen that nothing we've done has made any kind of decision, right? We've had a greet function. Every time we call it, it says hello world. We have a personal greeting function. Every time we call it with a name and a greeting, it just says, hi, name, your favorite number is number. What if we wanted something that could decide whether or not someone's favorite number was a good favorite number? This is where the idea of logic comes around. So with logic, we introduce things like the if keyword. So the if keyword, what's often called like an if-then type statement, allows us to have our programs make decisions for themselves. So the way the if statement works is we give it, the general structure of an if statement looks like this. So if, and then parentheses, and I'm going to type something here. I don't want you to type along with what I'm typing right now. I'll tell you when you can pick back up. So a condition goes in here, and statements go inside of here. If some condition is true, braces, this is what I want you to do, right? If it's raining outside, then I will bring a jacket, right? If it's cold in the morning, maybe you brought a sweater. I didn't because I like the cold. So this is t-shirt weather for me.
Are you using capitals for any reason?
I'm giving you a demonstration. I don't want you to copy this. This is like a hand wavy portion. I'm just kind of giving you like a general view of what's here. So this condition is where the condition will go, and where I've written statements is where the statements will go. This is the structure of an if statement. If braces, sorry, parentheses, That's where the condition goes. Braces is where the statements goes. So I want to have a condition that says if this person's favorite number is the good one, then I want to print something to them. So I can say if the favorite number is 42, I want to console log good choice. So here's the condition. And the condition is a little expression. We've seen before we can take favorite number and we can multiply it by something, we can add something to it. Now we're comparing it to something. And the three equal signs here, which I'm going to call the threequels. Threequels. If favorite number is threequels 42, then console log a good choice. Right? We've seen a one equal sign before, right? Let name equals 42. Sorry, Gavin, and let favorite number equals 42. Let greet equals function. Here we're using the three equals. For those of you who have come along with JavaScript and have done two equals, get in the habit of writing three equals instead. And if you want to know why three equals versus two equals, for those who have some JavaScript background, I will tell you why that shift is happening for you. And we will probably reintroduce double equals somewhere later. But for now, just realize, kind of go along with the way we're going to do comparisons is with three equals in JavaScript. So if my favorite number is exactly 42, that's what the three equal sign says, then console log good choice. And you see when I ran that expression, it said good choice because favorite number currently has inside of it 42. So what you were saying, Kenny, is why is that equal and greater than? Right? I could have said, right? But in JavaScript, you write it like this. So this is if my favorite number is greater than or equal to 42, console log this. So I get good choice. If I reassign favorite number and I make it 50, and I run this if statement again, what am I going to get? Anybody?
Error because favorite number.
Yeah. So what's my favorite number right now?
50.
Is 50 more than or equal to 42? Yes or no? Yes. So if the answer to this condition is yes, we do what's inside. So if what favorite number is, if that variable is more than or equal to 42, then let's say good choice. If I make my favorite number 12, what will this do? So we,
Throw an error.
yeah, it's actually going to do nothing. So since 12 is not more than or equal to 42, it skips what's inside of the braces, right? So JavaScript says, I'm going to compare the condition portion. I'm going to figure out that condition portion. Is that true or is that false? This condition always ends up in a Boolean, a true or a false. And we're going to ask, is this condition right now, is it a true statement or does it end up being a false statement? Well, since favorite number right now is 12, 12 is not more than or equal to 42, so that expression is false. And it will not do what's inside of the braces. It skips it. It skips over this portion. It says, ah, nope, favorite number wasn't more than or equal to 42, so I'm not going to do the console log. What if we wanted to do something when the expression is false? This is where the else portion of an if statement happens. So we could say, if this number is greater than or equal to 42, say good choice. Otherwise, else, console.log, not so good. Now, since favorite number is what? 12. JavaScript says, aha, I'm not going to do the first brace, but you've given me an otherwise. Otherwise, else, do this portion. Right? So it's like a fork in the road. If this statement is true, I'm going to execute this path of code, the first path. Otherwise, I'm going to execute the second path of code. if statement. If favorite number is more than 42, console log this, otherwise that. Let's change our greeting method. I'm going to reload the page. I'm going to clear out my JavaScript by reloading the page. Now let's go back and change our personal greeting method. Where was it? All the way back up here. Here it is. Here's our personal greeting method. So I'm going to change this to say, inside of here, oops. So here's a trick. If you're editing this, right, if you're using the up arrow to edit this after reloading the page, if you press return in the middle, it will finish the evaluation. You have to use Shift Enter to add a blank line. This is probably the last time we're going to define functions here in console. Right? In a minute, we're going to see how to write code in our JavaScript files themselves. So let's pretend like this said, let's put that condition inside here. If the person number is 42, let's console log the message. Else, we'll get rid of this last console message. Right. So we're going to go back up and make personal greetings say this. Don't feel bad if you're not, this is kind of getting to be a much to type along with. This kind of thing you can catch up with later if you need be. But I'll try and leave this on the screen as long as I can for you to retype it. So the easiest way to do this might be just to like reload the page and retype this if you want. So if I say personal greeting Gavin and 42, let's see if we can figure out what this code is going to do. Gavin becomes person name, and 42 becomes person number. So inside of personal greeting, we know that person name is Gavin, and person number is 42. We compute what message is. Right? Message becomes, hello, Gavin, your favorite number is 42. And then JavaScript hits an if statement. And JavaScript says, oh, okay, programmer wants me to make a decision. Fine. Let me look at what's inside of the condition. Person number equals, or 3 equals 42. So it's going to compare what's inside of person number, which is currently what? What's inside of person number right now? If I call this function? 42. Is 42 equal to 42? Sure is. So we'll console log message. The else portion will be skipped. We're not going to do the else portion. So if I execute this, what do we expect to happen?
It'll just say, hello, Gavin, your favorite number is 42.
Yeah. Hello, Gavin. Your favorite number is 42. Let's try 43. So Gavin gets assigned to person name. 43 gets assigned to person number. We build a message, hello, Gavin, your favorite number is 43. If person number, which currently has 43, is that exactly equal to 42? This is false. That condition is not true. So JavaScript is going to come over and do the else portion. And we should see what? Not so good, try again. Right? So now our programs have the ability to make decisions. I should have bookmarked this, but I don't know if I have. Yeah. So I'll put this link in Slack. Actually, let me do it right now. So this is, I think, a thing that will help you all as you're working on code. This site is a little like visualizer for code. So we can write code here in JavaScript, and then we can execute it, and we can kind of watch what JavaScript is doing. So let's put some of the code we've been doing, and I'm going to put this in, so don't feel like you've got to follow this along, but I think this is a good thing for you to try later on. I think this is a really neat tool as you're starting to learn kind of how JavaScript and logic works. This site here, we can type in JavaScript code. So you can type in code and you can say hit visualize execution. And now what it's going to do is it's going to walk us through this code step by step and let us see inside the brain of JavaScript. Right? So if you're new to JavaScript or you're new to logic and this kind of thing, this really helps. So on the left-hand side, we have our code, and on the right-hand side, we have the brain of JavaScript. And the little arrow is pointing at where JavaScript is right now, as JavaScript is working through our code. So the very first thing JavaScript is going to do is it's going to start reading our code. And we just taught it personal greeting. Let personal greeting be this function. On the right-hand side, you see inside of JavaScript's brain is what? A variable called personal greeting that's equal to that function. Right? That's what's inside of JavaScript's brain right now. If we step over this line, see where JavaScript is right now? Right? It's on the very first line of our function. And what's inside of JavaScript's brain? Person name is Gavin, and person number is 42. If JavaScript does the next line, message, right? JavaScript brain now has message. Hello, Gavin, your favorite number is 42. We see it compare that number, and we see that it goes to the console log. And we see the output show up here. And then it's done. If we edit this code again and put in 43 and visualize this, and we step over, learn what personal greeting is, call personal greeting, so it jumps up inside of personal greeting, right? It now knows that person name is Gavin and person number is 43. We compute what message is. We compare person number to 42. So person number is 43. It's not 42. So we go here. So as we work through some of these examples, or as you're working on examples on your own, try out this site. See if this visualization helps you. If you're a more visual person than you are a symbolic person, this really helps. As we get into some more complicated things tomorrow, we're going to learn a couple of different more data types. You will see how this will help you kind of see what's going on inside the code. I really like this site. Just found this one last cohort, and it tends to help you kind of see what's going on inside of the program, because just reading the code itself, right? You kind of have to keep your own mental model of this, and that will develop over time. But if you find that this visualization helps, you can work some of the code this way. Question?
What's the return value where it says undefined in red?
Because all functions are going to return something eventually, but we haven't really learned returning from functions yet.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So this function doesn't give, things go into this function, but nothing comes back out of the function. And eventually we're going to learn functions that return something, and then the return value would show up here. But since it doesn't return anything, the return value is, well, I don't know, undefined. Cool. So we've been working in console for a while. Let's talk about working from inside of our code, right? Because this is great for little things, but you can see once we start typing this amount of code, it gets to be kind of tough, right? And we already had some challenges like typing code into the console. So let's put some code in our JavaScript, in our app. So let's open up the app that we made. And if you look inside of public, there's one new file in here, main.js. It's a file we didn't have before. And if you look inside of the index, you'll see there's a new entry here in our code towards the bottom. Script. This is a new tag we haven't seen before. This is the script tag that tells our browser, please go load some JavaScript and evaluate it into our page. So the script tag can come in two styles. It can come this way, and it can come this way. So you can write an opening and closing script tag and just type JavaScript right in the middle of it. That's awesome. Or you can have an opening and closing script tag, but give it an SRC. Kind of like we have an SRC for images. The SRC, or source for the script tag, says, here's a file, here's a URL, here's a path to where my JavaScript lives. Please go load that off the internet or off of my page and evaluate it. And it lets us keep our JavaScript in a JavaScript file separate from our HTML, kind of like how we kept our CSS separate from our page. So you might be in the habit of writing script like this. You'll see it used. If you're writing more than like 1 or 2 lines, it's better just to put it inside of a file. And for those who have done some JavaScript before, you'll notice that we're putting JavaScript at the bottom of the file, not in the head. And that's another thing, if you're curious about why that is, come chat with me later and we can have a discussion about that. Just know that for now, we're going to define our JavaScript like this at the bottom of the page. And lo and behold, app beta gives us a JavaScript file. So let's go look and see what's inside that JavaScript file. Aha, there's some code in here already. Let's put this code aside for a minute. Let's put this code aside for a minute. I didn't mean to do that. Why is it putting equal signs in there? That's weird.
You're commenting out.
Yes. Yeah, so in JavaScript, it's the same thing, command slash, and it's 2 slashes here, like this. So you'll notice that my command and slash key is sensitive to the language it's in. So if I'm inside of a JavaScript program, command and slash will give me backslash comments. That's how you comment out in JavaScript versus the /* of CSS.
Does it have to be every single line, or could it just be an opening?
Yes, you can. It also supports commenting like this, but the automatic commenter, right, does lines here. So let's take our personal greeting function that we defined here. Let's just stick it in the JavaScript, and I'm gonna put this last. You can copy and paste it. So I'm just going to put this code right inside of here and save. Oops, I think I missed a clean brace when I pasted this.
Yeah, my code's not working, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we're having those red,
Yeah.
what they call the
Check
trigger
those.
line.
So I forgot this closing brace. So we should see, hopefully, if you have Prettier installed, even if you like misindent things. Here, let's misindent a few things. Hopefully, if we have some things misindented here, Prettier will come along and reform things. So you should have the only squiggly line you should have is one on personal greeting.
Is it best practice to always put the else on the same line as the closing brace?
Yes, it's a stylistic thing. I think in fact, Prettier will enforce that. So see how if I write else's like this, like so, Prettier is going to enforce the current JavaScript standard formatting of else like this. So Prettier is going to also enforce a code style. That's the code style we'd like you to follow. What you're going to find is every team has its own code style. And my general recommendation is you just follow the code style that your team is using. We're following the ESLint standard what's it called, something JS standard for where things go. And you'll also notice that if we type in, if you happen to type in double quotes in your JavaScript, Prettier will convert them to single quotes. So Prettier is going to do a fairly good job formatting your code. So hopefully, the only squiggly you have is personal greeting. So let's call personal greeting with Gavin and 42. Then over in our browser, let's reload the page. Where'd my console log go? Oh, I forgot to save it. Hey, look at, I made my own mistake. Look, see my dot is still there? I forgot to save.
Where? Oh.
Dot at the top of the page, save, no dot at the top of the page. And you'll notice that my JavaScript is re-executing as well. So not only does your HTML and your CSS reload, but your JavaScript reloads. So if you notice over on the right-hand side, I'm gonna clear my browser and reload. Hello, Gavin. Your favorite number is 42. Right there in my console. So now every time that I change my JavaScript, let's come back over here, I'm going to change my JavaScript. I'm going to change this to say Jason, and I'm going to hit save. Hello, Jason. Your favorite number is 42. Is anybody following along with this and not happening for you?
Yeah, it's not happening.
Okay, let's come take a quick look. Everybody else is either following along or having success.
Oh, so you have the CL is one big string. I want to end the string and then have 42.
There we go. Cool. So you'll notice that as we change the code and reload, right, our page is changing. Right? As we pass it various things. If I pass it a 12 now, right, I get not so good. Try again. If your console is clearing and you don't want it to, oops. There is a, if you hit this little gear icon, there's some options for the console, and you can turn on preserve log. You'll notice that maybe yours is clearing the log every time you save your code and mine is not. That's because I have preserve log turned on. So my log is not going to clear until I tell it to clear. So every time I change my code, Tony, right, my log is just appending. If I were to turn this off, here's not so good. And if I now make this work, 112, right, it's clearing. So with preserve log off, every time your page refreshes, your log clears. Or you can turn preserve log on. Totally up to you, whichever works better for you. I like to preserve the log, and then I choose when I want to clear it. So I will choose when I'm coding to leave this off, or preserve log on, right, and get different output. And when I'm like, the log is too confusing, I can't see which portion came from when, I'll just click this little no, like no smoking, like slash through icon, and that will clear the screen. That will clear the log out. Up to you, what you think works best. So, right, this is a little bit easier to code this way than to code in the console. The console really kind of reserved for like playing around for code. I like to think of it as like the code playground, where you can try some things out. But mostly what we're going to do is we're going to write code in our JavaScript file, just like we wrote our HTML and our CSS. And as soon as we hit save, our page is going to reload, our app is going to reload, and we're going to see the result of that JavaScript executing. So this works exactly the same way as when we were in the console, except we don't have to type everything and retype everything. We can just change values. Right? Maybe we say this is greater than or equal to 42. Right? Now Now it works a little bit different. Now as long as it's greater than or equal to, it'll work 12 and 43. Right? We can make changes to our code and just reload, hit save, and see immediately the effect. Right? So coding-wise, this is how we're going to code. If we're wondering about how does a thing work, like, hey, how does less than or equal to work? So we can say, like, let number equal to 12. If number is less than or equal to 13, console log, yup. Ah, okay, that's how that works. Or, hey, how does interpolation work again? Let me try. The answer is 41 plus 1. Oh yeah, that's how that works. This kind of becomes your little experimentation ground. Let me try some things out. But mostly what we're going to do is we're going to write code this way. Right? And you'll also notice when I'm writing code here, I change a few things and I hit save. I want the same feedback that I got from HTML and CSS when I'm changing my styles and I want to see them in my browser. The same programming style applies here. We're going to write a little bit of code, then we're going to see it reflect in the browser. So this is great, except what if I didn't have the console open like most users to my site do, right? If I have this thing where it's like, hey, let me have it output the message or not so good, try again, right? Someone visits my site, I don't see anything. So we don't tell our users to come around and have the console open to our app very often, right? The user should not have to have that console open. So there must be another way of integrating and accessing the page. And in fact, there is. If we come back to our browser once more, into the inspector, and into the console, we will notice that the browser gives us a very special variable that's available to us. We don't even have to declare it. The browser just gives it to us, and it's called document. So this document variable is pretty powerful. You might have noticed my screen turned blue for a second there when I typed in document. That's because what outputs here is actually the reference to the DOM object, the document object model. And so we're going to say the word DOM a lot. I'm not talking about like DOM DeLuise or DOM Perignon. I'm talking about the document object model. Right? Another abbreviation because we pronounce it. Right? The DOM, not DOM. So when you write HTML as a file and your browser loads it, right, it doesn't keep that HTML file around. It interprets it and creates a model of that HTML in its memory. Right, remember how before we can go into the CSS and kind of change the numbers around, right? That's also part of the DOM, right? What CSS is applied. But we notice like as we change those fonts or we change those M's, it didn't go back into the file because they're separate things. So once our page loads, we have access to the entire document. All of the tags, all of the CSS is all available to us in JavaScript. If I highlight this document variable here, I'm just putting my mouse over it. Notice how in the blue everything highlights. Does that seem familiar? It's the same thing that happens here. Right? When I'm hovering over different things in my element view, I'm highlighting different DOM. I'm highlighting this H1 element. Notice I stopped calling them tags. I hover this H1 element in my DOM browser, my element browser, and it shows it to me in the screen. That's the same thing that's happening over here in the console. When I highlight the document, it's saying, hey, I know where the document is. It's this everything that's in blue. Here it is. But I want to be able to find things on my page. I'd like to be able to say, well, I don't want the whole document. I just want this H1. Hey JavaScript browser, can you tell me where that H1 is? Well, the document has a method called query selector. And query selector takes a string that represents a selector. We've learned selectors last week when we talked about CSS. Right? We talked about tag selectors, class selectors, ID selectors, child selectors. So if I want the H1 on the page, I can put the H1 here, and it will give me back that element of the page. Every rule that you've learned about CSS for styling can go inside of this string. So any complex rules you've learned about how you would select something on the page to style it are exactly the same rules that we can now use from JavaScript to find it. So I've asked the document to please query, go find, go look for this selector, H1, and it gave me back a variable that is exactly that part of the screen. It's exactly that element on the page, right? Such that if I highlight it, it's just like I'm highlighting in my element browser. So I could even assign that to a variable. Let element equal, hey document, please query the selector. I'm going to tell you what the selector is. It's an H1. And I've put that element, the reference to that element, the thing that's pointing to that element, inside of a variable called element. Right? And if I ask for it, just like I put name equal to or number equal to, I can ask for that element. What's inside of it is that part of the page. The element is the thing that says hello world. So the document represents the entire HTML. And I can ask that for something, and we're going to learn what the dot means and how all that works, because we're going to create our own, whatever this document is later. But for now, just know that we can ask the document a question. Hey document, can you query all the things that you have, all the elements on your page? Can you go off and query based on this selector and give me back the very first H1 that you found? Yeah, I can do that. And by the way, when you're done, put that in the variable called element.
It's only going to give you the first one?
Exactly, the very first one.
That partially answers my question. I was going to say, what's the advantage to doing it this way as opposed to going into elements and clicking on H1?
Because I can do this now from code. I can now do this from my code. So I'm kind of experimenting here in my little playground. We're about to pick up this knowledge and go put it inside of our code and see what happens. So I need a way, what I want to be able to do is when my greeting happens, I don't want to console log this. I want to change what hello world says. I don't want to say hello world anymore. I want it to say, hello person's name, your favorite number is blah, or not so good. So I want to be able to affect the page now, not just output something to the console. But in order to do that, I got to find where that hello world is on the page and get a reference to it. I need a variable that represents that bit of the page. That's what document query selector is going to let me do. Question?
So you can put JavaScript right inside that H1 element there and start manipulating things?
I'm not going to put JavaScript in it. I'm going to use JavaScript to find it.
Okay.
Right? I'm using JavaScript and everything that we learned about CSS selectors to use this as a hunter for that element. Right? We already learned that if I put H1 in my CSS, that we can use that to style it. Right? If I go to my screen CSS, right, I can make an H1 selector here and style things. Anything that you do here, these selectors here, that's the same thing that query selector in JavaScript can take. Right? So that's the same thing that goes inside of here as a string. Right? So you started adding classes to things, and we're going to see how we're going to use that eventually. But now that I have this element variable that represents that H1 on my page, I can ask it, hey, what's your text content? What's inside of you? What's the text that's on the screen where that H1 is? It says hello world. I've asked the document, hey document, go query, go find the H1 that in a variable. Well, that variable represents that element on the page, and I can ask that element, what's your text content? Browser says, well, I know how to do that. I'll just look inside of that tag, inside of this element that's on the page. I'll look right here. What's inside of it? Hello world. Right? That comes from the HTML that we gave the page when we created it, right? If I change this to say made at SDG, I'm going to this again. That says made at SDG, and if I go to my console, if I get my mouse back, right? If I ask for that element, right, the element is still here. But if I ask for the element's text content, it says made at SDG. But not only can I ask for the content, I can change it. So if this element is this element on the page and the text content is what it's showing, what do you think is going to happen when I do this? The content on the page changed. Right? So this document is our gateway to finding elements on the page, being able to find out what's on the page and change what's on the page. That capability is what opens up dynamic web applications. Without this, we can't do it. Everything you've seen on the web where things are moving and changing and dynamically adding, right? Is a page, something on the page is changed without you reloading the page or re-navigating somewhere else. It's some descendant of this type of programming. Right? It's this dynamic programming that lets us have modern web applications. This is the kernel of that. We're asking the document, please find me an element on the page and give me a variable that represents what that is. I can ask for its content, and I can change its content. Right? This is going to get really deep. This is pretty much everything we're going to do for the next 2 weeks is based on this concept, and it's going to get more complex. This is the kernel, the core idea of that. So if I can ask for the selector, find the element on the page, and change it, I can use that to my advantage in my code. Right? So here in my personal greeting method, one of the very first thing I said was say let element equal to document query selector h1. Right? Just like I have my message, I can have another variable that's just the element. Let me save this. Right? Nothing has changed so far. All I have now is another element variable in my code. You'll notice that VS Code is complaining, right? Right. It says I've declared that variable, but I haven't used it yet. So this is the idea of the linter, the little squigglies, right? You'll be familiar with these from writing, where you have typos, right, or misspelled words. In code, it's going to give you hints as to errors in your code. What it's telling me here is I haven't used element yet. So let's use it. If the person's number is 42, let's change the text content to be whatever's inside a message. Right? And otherwise, let's make it say not so good. Now the page is saying that rather than the console. I don't need the console anymore to see if my program is doing what it needs to be doing. What happens if I change this 43 to a 42? What do you think is going to happen? Yeah. Tony. Hello, Tony. Your favorite number is 42. I'm asking here for the document They go find me the very first H1 on the page. I build up a message to greet the person. If that person's number is exactly 42, go take that element that we just found and change its text to say whatever that message is. Otherwise, let's say not so good. So now we have a page that's responding dynamically to the code below. What if we wanted to prompt the person and get that information from the user? Let's go over to the console. Let's run the prompt command. And say, what is your name? Hey, look at that. What's your name? Gavin. Aha! It returned something to me. It returned the name. So down here I can say, let the name be prompt, what is your name? And let's change this, instead of saying Tony, let's let it be name. Now when I run my code, it says, what is your name? Let's type Jason. Hello, Jason. Your favorite number is 42.
Sorry, I fell off a little while back. I'm not really sure.
Okay. So what we're doing now is we're adding a little bit of logic to our page, and rather than have it output something to the console, right, we're able to change what's on the page. Right? The idea of dynamically changing the page.
So it's how we have been working with JavaScript.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Without the JavaScript, if we didn't have any of this JavaScript in here, the page would just say what? Made it SDG. If we didn't have any of this JavaScript, let's comment out this line of loading the JavaScript. If our page didn't have any JavaScript, the page would just say made it SDG, because that's what it has. Right? This is like every other page we've created. We've got some HTML, we've got some CSS, and we can construct a page and we can style it. Right? I made an H1, and in my screen CSS, I made it red. But now what I want is I want the page to be dynamic. I want it to do something a little different. So we had our little personal greeting before from when we were just playing around on the console, where we passed it some information and we made some decisions and we outputted something to the console. Now what we're doing is we're saying, let's get rid of this for the moment. Let's get rid of this and just say Gavin, just to take a step back 1 second. So now we're teaching JavaScript about personal greeting. It's a function that takes a personal greeting and a person name and a number and does something. Then down here we're going to ask to call it. Hey, I taught you personal greeting. Go call personal greeting with Gavin and 42. What personal greeting now does is say, well, hey, I know that there's this variable, super powerful variable called document that's available to me whenever I want it inside of my browser. And I can ask the document to give me back the H1 that's on the page. It's going to say, hey, give me this H1. I want to manipulate it.
So if you go back to the JavaScript, the document.querySelector, we don't have to define that in the console, right? We can just start from our document.
Yep. Yeah, document is given to you by the browser.
Okay.
The browser says, I've created this document variable for you. It's always available to you. Use it at your will.
Okay.
We don't have to create it. The browser created it for us.
And querySelector is a method that's already there.
Yeah, it's a behavior, a method, a function that the document knows how to do.
Okay.
So we're saying, hey, document, you know how to query selector for things. I'm asking you, please go find the H1 that's on the page. Go hunting for the very first H1 that's on the page. When you find it, if you find it, give it back to me. Give me back a handle. Let me grab onto that H1. And then rather than console log, we're saying, well, let's go take that element and let's change its text content to be whatever the message is. So whatever that text was gets ripped out of the page, and we're giving it new text. Or, if that's not true, let's go find that element. Let's take the text that's inside. Let's rip that text out and put the text not so good in its place. So the page is dynamically changing. Right? So if we save this, let me save this.
Element is something we created, though.
This variable, yes. So I'm going to use this a lot. So I tend to use variable names that represent what they are. To make a point, the variable name that I will use is Taco Tuesday. I can call this whatever I want. It's only really super appropriate on Tuesdays, but it's Monday. Right? The name of the variable doesn't matter. Here, the variable name that I make up does not matter. I can't change the name of document, and I can't change the name of query selector. Those are things that are given to me by the browser. But I can say, hey, go query H1 and go put in a variable called Taco Tuesday. Right? And then, hey, Taco Tuesday, change your text content to message. Well, what is Taco Tuesday? What's the H1 that came from the page? My natural habit as a programmer is to name things representing what they are. Although sometimes when we're trying to understand something, we can confuse the name with its ability to do the thing. So if you ever see me say Taco Tuesday, it just means you can make up whatever name here you want. You generally want to name things nicely. If you say Taco Tuesday, right, no one's going to know what you mean, right? That's why I use it as a placeholder name. But what Taco Tuesday represents is that H1 live on the page. The live H1 on the page that the document gave me, I can go change its text content. Right? I can make it say whatever I want. Right? It's the same thing, right? And you ask, like, can we do this on any page? In fact, you can. Let's go into Suncoast.io and let's inspect this variable. Aha! It's an H2 that says Academy. What if I say document query selector H2? Aha! There it is. If I say let Taco Tuesday equal this, that's what the text content is. Academy.
So you couldn't have just typed in Taco Tuesday and, like, was that already created? Like, if you had...
Yes. So Taco Tuesday is the H2 itself that I can hover on. H2, Taco Tuesday text content is the text content inside of the H2. Right? So Taco Tuesday text content is just the text, right? I hover over it, nothing happens. It's just a string, just the letters that are inside of it. Where Taco Tuesday itself, the H2 is the actual element on the page.
So I guess what I'm asking is, did you, in the console, did you even have to type in let Taco Tuesday, since it's already defined in our JavaScript document?
No. So this is a totally different page, totally separate from this JavaScript document. I'm hacking on Suncoast.io.
But if we were in the other intro to JavaScript page, we wouldn't have had to do that.
Right. Remember how message was not available to us outside of this function? Taco Tuesday is also not available to us outside of this function. This Taco Tuesday is only valid when we're running this page between here and here. What I want to show you here is that this applies everywhere. Right? You can do this to any page. Right? All I'm doing is asking for that H2 live off of that page. Hey document, give me the very first H2. What's inside of it? Oh, it's that element. What's its text content? Academy, and I can change it. Right? If I reload the page, right, it goes back to what it was, and my Taco Tuesday variable is gone. Right? But I can get it back by asking for the first H2 and changing it. Right here in our app, I know that there's one H1. I'm just asking for it. And then I can say, once I have it, I can change its content. I'm just changing it dynamically. Let's put two H1s on the page. And let's turn off this JavaScript for a second. So here's our two H1s made in St. Pete and made at SDG. Right? We're asking for the H1 and we're changing its content. When I re-enable the JavaScript, what do you think is going to happen? Anyone take a guess? Yeah, potentially. The reason why it doesn't is that query selector gives you back the very first one it finds on the page. Query selector says, I'm gonna look for H1s, and the very first one I find, I'm gonna give that one back to you. So what if we wanted to change the second one, not the first one? Well, what if we put a class on this H1? Let's put the class location on this H1. Let's see if we can use query selector to narrow in on that element. So rather search for just H1s, let's look for H1s with the location class. This is the same syntax here at the end here, H1 location, that we would use in CSS. Right? If I wanted to style this in CSS, right, I would say H1s that are location are color green. That same selector style, h1.location, is the same selector style I'm going to use here to go query for it. And now notice, hello Gavin, your favorite number is 42, is in the second H1 that's on the page, right? Because it's the first one that's found if I'm looking for H1s with the location class. If I say class equals, let's say, banner, I can style those banners right, weird purple. Now if I say banner, it goes there. If I say location, it goes there. Right? I'm finding the very first H1 with that class. Depending on which one I give it, it's going to find this element, or it's going to find this element. Right? And then all I'm saying is, hey, take that element. Let's change this back to say element. Let's call it found element. Right? And we'll say found element here, and we'll say found element here. Right? You can call the variable whatever you want. Element, Taco Tuesday, found element, thing, whatever. All that matters is that we're consistent. So let's go find that H1 location, and let's change its message. Let's change its text content. Now we have the ability to have the page be dynamic. Right? If I change this 42, if I change the Gavin to Tony, the name changes. If I change the 42 to something other than 42, the message changes. Right? If I want to make the name dynamic, I can use the prompt method. That's what brings the little dialog box when page ever asks you for information. It's the prompt method. I can put that in a variable and pass it. Now, every time I run my page, it asks me for my name, Mark, not so good. Reload the page, Jason, not so good. Let's change this back to 42. So now, I'm prompting for a name, Gavin, Tony, reload, Jason. Okay. This is how I would prompt for some information from the user, put that in a variable, pass that along, make things more dynamic. Right? This is kind of a little sneak preview of how we're going to start building more complex applications. Right? Rather than have a pop-up, at some point we'll use a form, we'll learn how to click on things. Right? But the kernel of this is variables, expressions, functions, and the document. That's kind of the kernel. This is probably the code that you should kind of mess around with. And we'll get to this part tomorrow. That's down here, the part that I commented out, how this works and why that's there. For now, I encourage you to just kind of play around with this, right? Change the message, change the input, change the if statement, try greater than, less than, right? We could also do this instead of the number. Let's do it with the name. Hey, if the person's name, let's greet them. Right now the number doesn't matter, but the name does. Right? This idea of data and behavior is what makes up all of our programs. Right? Our data here is our person name, person number, found element, and message now. Right? Those are our variables. That's where we're putting information. And our behavior now is we have one behavior called personal greeting. And we have other behavior where we have an if statement. Now we have it that if the person's name is Gavin, we'll give them a nice greeting. And if the person's name is not Gavin, we give them a not so good. Right. Change this to Mark. And the last thing that we got was that the browser gives us this document variable that we don't even have to create that has the ability to query using the same thing we already learned in CSS. We're already reusing knowledge. Reusing the same selectors we use to style things can now be used to find things in our browser and give us variables that we can modify their content with. Right? This is unlocking the first door to building all of the full stack front end logic applications we're going to be building for the rest of the time here. Right? This is kind of the core. This is the kind of the core nugget piece. So I encourage you to take this code and kind of play around with it, change it around, style it, add some more elements, see if you can find those elements and change them. Add a couple p tags to the page. See what happens when you do that. Right? How can you find a p tag? Change these classes around. See how you would find the other classes on the page. Tomorrow we're going to learn some more things we can do with this. We learned that query selector only gives us back the first element of the page. There are other methods that can give us all the elements that match. So what if we wanted to change all the H1s on the page? There are methods that do that. That's kind of where we're going. Right? But this is the core bit. We're kind of cracking that door open to being able to build dynamic pages. And the core parts are variables, data, methods, behavior. We're going to learn more kinds of data besides strings and numbers. Right? We're going to learn different ways of having functions and different things functions can do. And then we're going to learn different things the browser can do. And that's how we're going to kind of level up through the rest of this week to get us to the point where we can start learning some of the front-end frameworks we're going to do. Right? But as complex as things get, right, at some point it boils down to this. Right? This is the part of the whole pyramid that we grow from. Cool. Let's talk about your homework for a minute for tonight. I will put this into your homework repository in a minute. probably thinking, oh no, we're gonna have to code JavaScript. No. Your first homework assignment is writing your first blog post. So for tonight, what I'd like you to do is write your first blog post. So on Medium, create a blog post that talks about a concept we've gone over in class. This could be anything from HTML to CSS or JavaScript, or anything you learned over the last week. As a challenge, consider picking a topic you think you're weak on, and then write about that, right? Because it will force you to kind of reflect on that particular thing and work on that. So has everybody created, have we covered that? Have we created a blog post yet? A blog?
We signed up for Medium.
Have you signed up for Medium, but you haven't done one yet? Yeah, because, I think, okay. So you all have created one yet. Okay, good. So then I'd like you to submit that link as part of your assignment. That'll be what you turn in. So there's no code thing to work on. Consider just this. If you'd like to work on some coding things, I would suggest you work on playing around with this code that we did in class. Kind of mess around, continue to kind of do what we were doing here, mess around with it, try it out. Kind of play around with the code, see what you can make it do. If you want to dig more into exploring code, and I heard a couple of you talking about it this morning, there's a site called Code Wars. This is what we're going to start to use for warm-ups in the morning. I would suggest if you want to dig in a little bit deeper into JavaScript, sign up for a Code Wars account. And if this is something you're interested in, come see me when we do review at 2, and I'll help you get signed up with the Code Wars and show you how to work through Code Wars. The idea with Code Wars is it gives you very small JavaScript-based code challenges to kind of start working your logic and data and behavior brain. They're kind of small nuggets of practice, and this is the site we're typically going to use this week for practicing JavaScript as we go. But for now, I would say if you don't have your Medium account set up, go ahead and get it set up. I'm not looking for a very long, detailed blog post, but it can cover anything from last week, HTML or CSS, or if you want to try and capture today what we did with JavaScript, I would say do that. I will drop a couple of examples in Slack of other blog post students have done, just to kind of give you a sense of the type of thing we're looking for you to work on. And when homework is due, just go ahead and turn in the link to your published post. If you choose not to create a public page, which I can understand, it's something we recommend, but if you have issues with publishing things publicly, I would say go ahead and still write the topic, and you're welcome to email it to me or just paste it in as the text of your homework assignment if you don't want to publish it publicly on Medium. It's still kind of public on GitHub. But I would encourage you, if you don't have a reason not to go ahead and start building that blog that way. Cool. Any questions on this? Awesome. Okay. We will get back together at 2 if you have any questions this morning from the things that we've done in JavaScript. I encourage you between now and then to kind of continue to play around with this, see what you can make it do. If you have questions or things aren't working right, let's chat at 2 and just make sure you're all on a good path. Cool? Awesome. Welcome to JavaScript.